Hello, Periscope friends. Hello, replay viewers. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hope you guys are having a lovely Wednesday morning. I am just hopping on here to share some Latin resources that we have used in our homeschool and to talk to you a little bit about. Hello, all for him. I saw you over on Amy's scope, so pop up your name. If you haven't been here before in one of my scopes, put your name up and let me know, and I'll probably forget it anyway, but at least it'll be nice to see it once. So let me flip this around and introduce myself, and we'll talk a little bit about Latin. Come on, phone. There we go. Okay. All right, so my name is Lena Sutherland, and I'm the homeschool mom of 7 kids. The 4 oldest are school-aged, and they are right now 11, 9, 8, and 6. And so those really are the 4 that I've had some experience doing Latin with. And then I have 3 who are younger. And if you want to find me online, my blog is Homeschooling Without Training Wheels. So it's hswotrainingwheels.com. And I'm putting that up there because I do have a post on the blog right now about Latin and why I teach Latin, and also whether or not you have to teach Latin, whether it matters if you teach Latin or not. So some interesting thoughts on that. Robin, could you close the door, please? It got left open when Ruth came in. Thank you, dear. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about in terms of Latin is that there are 2 kind of approaches to teaching Latin. And if you're at all familiar with teaching reading, there's a parallel here. So, for example, when you learn about teaching reading, there's 2 approaches. There's the phonics method, and then there's what we call the whole language method. And the phonics method is more, you start with the details, and then you broaden your perspective until you're reading whole words. You start with, like, learning letter sounds and things like that. And then you expand that to reading whole words, and and then you're only reading words that contain the phonics sounds that you've already learned, right? So that's the phonics approach. And then the whole language approach is more like you're diving right into, hey, Selena, I'm so glad to see you. You dive right into actual reading, and you're more kind of observing as you go. Like, hey, did you notice that, this word started with 2 letters at the beginning, and what did we do with that? And there's a lot of, oh, hello, Sarah. I'm glad to have you here. Kimberly from Oklahoma. Okay, well, welcome. Glad to have you. And so with the whole language approach, you're looking at words and you're kind of taking this top-down view. Hello. Hi, I'm so glad you're on here. Kelly, good to see you. So whole language is a top-down approach. You're looking at words and then you're kind of observing the details as you look at it big picture. So there are 2 ways to teaching Latin also, which are very similar, very parallel to that. There's the grammar approach, and then there's the reading approach. So the grammar approach says, we need to learn these endings, we need to learn how to make verb forms, we need to learn how to form the adjectives, and then once we've done that, then we can start putting that together into sentences and reading things and translating. And then the reading approach says, let's just jump in and start reading, and we'll give them vocabulary at the bottom so that they know what those words actually mean. And then once they've done some of that, then they can look back and say, oh, isn't that weird how this word had one ending here and another ending here? And, how did you know which word was used in the sentence? So they're kind of jumping right in with reading and then observing as they go through the reading the differences in the words and how the endings are added on and that sort of thing. So the grammar approach and then the reading approach. Yes. Please ask her not to. Okay, so I wanted to show you a few books at different levels that use both of those approaches. Now, I will tell you, spoiler alert, I am more comfortable with the grammar approach. I'm not willing to say the grammar approach is better because, in reading, I'm more of a, phonics person, not a whole language kind of person. So that could just be my personality. To me, it makes more sense kind of to see how all the parts work and then put them together and start doing things with them. Hey, Forrest, welcome. But anyway, I'm going to show you both kinds because there are advantages to both, and it could be like with other things where I've used this and it's worked fine for my kids, but, maybe somebody else has had a kid that didn't work well for, and so they had to experiment with other methods. So the same with Latin. If you're working with one approach and it doesn't seem to be working, just know that there are kind of two general categories of Latin materials. So, okay, so first of all, I'm going to start with the reading approach, because like I said, that's the one that I'm not as fond of and that I don't use as much, but I do have some fun resources for that. So when I was a public school teacher, I also, I taught elementary school, so obviously we didn't have a Latin program in our elementary, but I had a Latin club. So once a month on a Wednesday after school, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders would stay after school and we'd do Latin together, and it was just kind of fun Latin. I have this like one weird hair that's sticking out. Anyway, so be it. Okay, and so what we used for that partly was this book called Minimus, and then there's a second book that goes with it, comes after Minimus Secundus, which just means the second minimus. And minimus is the Latin word for small, for the littlest. And so there's Minimus the mouse, and he's the character that's in these books. And it's very comic book style. So like I said, it's a reading approach right from the beginning. Tons of picture cues. So you're looking at the picture and you're able to kind of figure out what's happening because you're looking at the pictures. And then also on every story, I don't know if you can really see that, but anyway, there's a ton of vocabulary. So the idea is jump in, have them just start getting some real reading experience right from the beginning. And it's very, visually appealing, very interesting, and there's humor involved and all kinds of things like that, funny pictures. The mouse and the cat are constantly chasing you. But there's no, like, memorizing of charts or taking off endings and putting on endings, nothing like that. Hey, Forrest. And so those are the two books in that series. Okay, now this series, the Minimus and Minimus Secundus, is put out by, yes. Okay, so, and I'll tell you in a minute how you could kind of do a little of both if you wanted to. It's put out by Cambridge, like as in Cambridge University over in England. Yeah, that's cool, Kelly, thanks. And so then if you were to stick with Cambridge, then what you'd end up with is the Cambridge Latin series, which you might have seen. And they have different units. And, it's very much a reading approach. So even, and this is what I used actually when I was in public school and high school. So you're going to start every unit. Let me see if I can get a good picture. Similarly, not quite as like cartoony and colorful, but you start out with a little picture and some words under the pictures. You probably can't see it because it doesn't look like it's in focus. Anyway, but just a few words. So you're right off the bat reading things and learning, words. And then after you've read some stories, then they'll have a little grammar exercise that says, like, did you notice how it had this ending when it was at the beginning of the sentence, and then this other ending when it was at the end of the sentence, and why do you think that was? And this is how it's used in Latin. So that's the kind of whole language version of teaching Latin, which is called the reading approach. Okay, now, on to the version that I personally feel more comfortable with. And I've got two great resources for you, and they'll both be very useful. People ask me all the time, like, could I teach this if I don't know Latin? I want to say yes, but it's hard for me really to know because I know Latin. So it's hard for me to kind of step out of that and know for sure whether somebody who doesn't know Latin could do it, but I feel like you could, and both of these curriculums had the option of purchasing DVDs, and hey Jody, purchasing DVDs to go with them, so if you really wanted to do this and you just have like no Latin background, you could do that. Okay, so the first series is the Latin Road series, and it's called the Latin Road to English Grammar. This is done by Barbara Beers, and she was a homeschool mom who homeschooled her kids and kind of made this up, not made it up, but like, put together the curriculum as she went with her kids, and now she's published it. And this, it's not like fancy and colorful. It's just a spiral-bound notebook. But the thing that I love about this program is that Barbara is very thorough in explaining everything, and not just Latin, but English grammar. Like, so she's not going to say, so these are participles. She's going to walk you through what's a participle, and she's going to make sure that in English you understand what this concept is. So even the book itself is really helpful for, your student or yourself as you're just beginning to talk about these Latin concepts. She really spells everything out. And I actually used this series when I taught Latin online. When I stayed home at first and I had just one little guy. That wasn't very long. But anyway, for the first several years after I stayed home from teaching, I taught Latin online. And this was the program I used because I felt like it was so thorough. So if I wasn't going to be with students in person, I wanted something that was just going to explain everything. And this one really does. And she actually has, so this is the first volume of the Latin series. But what comes before this is called, I think it's called like the Phonics Road to Spelling. So she actually, like, it's set up such that you could start when they're little and do the Phonics Road program and then work up towards a bridge year where you then transfer over to Latin. So you're doing your phonics and your grammar in English, and then at a certain point you switch over, and she says that this could be your English program also. Like if you did this for your Latin, then you would not need like a, grammar curriculum for that, for the time when you're doing this, because she's covering all of that in here. So that's one interesting approach. And like I said, it's Barbara Beers does it, and she does include, not include, but like you can purchase videos of her teaching the materials, so that can help you and support you in that. Okay, now, my favorite, which I've saved for last, is the one that we're currently using. So, hey Jody. So, the one that that we use is Latin for Children. Now, the cool thing about the Latin for Children series is that it kind of starts out in the beginning with like a reading approach, and then when they get a little older, it switches over to a grammar approach. So the kind of prequel to Latin for Children is the Song School Latin, and this is the teacher's guide because I don't have any, none of my kids are doing Song School Latin right now, so I don't have a like student edition, and this is like the front cover of the teacher's manual, but it shows you what the second book looks like. And Song School Latin is exactly what it sounds like. It comes with a CD in the back of each student book. And so the chapters are not based on grammatical concepts. The chapters are based on themes. So like season words and family names and, just all kinds of like topics like that. Color words and number words and those kind of things. And you've got songs that go with them that help the children learn. And then they do have very simple activities that they do. Like, a page with 4 things on one side and 4 things on the other side, and you're drawing lines to match them up. So this is like super simple. I think they just recommend that the students have a good handle on English phonetics so that they won't kind of be confused. Can you teach this without knowing Latin? I know, that's what people always ask. Okay, so this book, The Latin Road to English Grammar, I really think, as best as I can estimate from being somebody who does know Latin, I really think you could do this without knowing Latin, especially if you get the DVDs that come with it to show you what, she kind of teaches the material to you. And so Latin for Children also has DVDs with it, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Okay, so Song School Latin, like I said, is very kind of reading approach where they're giving you words and they're giving you it's just a lot of vocabulary, basically. A lot of Latin vocabulary. And so it's just kind of a fun introductory approach to Latin. And then they transition you once you're done with Song School Latin, or you can do 1 and 2. We actually did 1 and 2 in a year. We just combined them and did them all together in a year. And then the next series is Latin for Children, and there's primers A, B, and C. And so this is just B from last year. But this is definitely a grammar approach. So you're going through each, grammatical concept. The chapters are based on grammatical concepts. And then they're also teaching the vocabulary, and they're also teaching, conjugating verbs and declining nouns and things like that. So just to give you an example, this is the opening page where you've got, at the top, you've got a chant, which means that's what you're memorizing this week. Those are the endings you're working on. And this is Latin for Children B, so this is a review at this point. And then down at the bottom, you have your vocabulary words that you're working on for the week. And then, this is what I love about this book. Right in the student book, they have just a whole, written narrative of what it is you're learning. And they have really great diagrams. So I don't know if you can tell, but they're explaining, what's first person, what's second person, what's third person. And this is the singular version of it, and then this is the plural version of it. So it's just, kind of a helpful, easy to understand graphic about the meaning of person and singular and plural. And that's something that I did not understand until I got to Latin, until I started taking Latin for sure. Okay, so, so that's Latin for children. And they also have another program that comes after that called Latin Alive. And I'm not sure if we're going to use that or not, because like I said, my oldest right now is 11, and we're getting ready to do Book C of Latin for Children this year. So, when he finishes that book, when the 3 that are in that right now finish that book, I might see about going on to a different language with them. I don't speak any other languages. Actually, I don't even speak Latin, which is one of the things about Latin. Like, people say, oh, you majored in Latin. Wow. Yeah, but you don't have to speak it. There's no conversational Latin. There's no Latin dialogue. At least not the college I went to. I don't know. Maybe things have changed in the last million years since I graduated from college. But Latin is primarily about translating from Latin to English, not a lot of the reverse. Some colleges will offer, like a composition course where you're composing in Latin, but that's a very, very tiny percentage of what you've been doing. So in a lot of ways, studying Latin really is just about understanding the mechanics of language. And the best example I can think of for why it is that studying another language, not just Latin, but any language really, is a good tool for learning your own language, it's because, you can understand English and you can write well without really knowing the names of terms like, object pronoun, or prepositional phrase. You can understand how language works. But it's like a car. You can drive the car without really knowing how the engine works. But if you need to take a piece out and put another piece in, then you have to have a little bit more understanding of how everything is functioning together as a whole. And so the same thing is true with languages and translating. If you're going to translate from one language to another, you have to have a little bit more understanding of what's going on there, so you know what the correlation is between one piece and another. So that's why I think studying another language helps you to understand English and helps it to make sense and helps it to be relevant. It helps it to, be something that somebody would want to spend some time figuring out. So, okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you about the Latin for Children series, I'm going to turn the camera around because it's on the computer. Okay, so Latin for Children also has this online component, which I love. I'm a digital learning person. So Latin for Children, and this is just the C one because it's the simplest one yet right now, goes with each of the books. And right now, Latin for Children has only developed a full, it's called Headventureland, by the way, headventureland.com. But they've only developed a full repertoire of activities for books A and B. And so C right now is still what they call light. It's still the light version because it's only a few free things. But what that means is that right now you can go and check this out because you don't have to have a password or a login or anything. So just go to headventureland.com and then under the book or the zone, where it says book zone, just choose Latin for Children C, light. And you can see there's also so there's some Song School Latin stuff. And these ones where they say full zone, those are the ones that are going to want a login. Now, they actually will let you try a few units of even the ones that say full zone. They'll let you try a few units for free, but then you'd have to pay, I think it's like $20 a year. So it's really not bad. And I just have all my kids use one account. So it's totally worth it. But anyway, Latin for Children C. So what they have, just as an example of some of the things that are available, is so they have some games. Flash Dash is for reviewing vocabulary. And then Chart Challenge, I love, because I feel like, this is what my kids are doing over the summer just to review their Latin. And so what they do is they can choose, why it's cut off, but anyway, they can choose, whichever book they want to work in and which unit they're working on. And then the Chart Challenge, maybe my screen is like zoomed out or something. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so then what they're going to do is they're going to drag and drop all of these endings in place. See, so they can move them all on the screen. And they're going to get them in order, and they even need to order the headings at the top and the labels that go down the left-hand side. And when they get them correct, they kind of click together and flash so that they'll know, and those two things stick together. So it at least gives them some hints along the way if they're getting things right. They won't just do the whole thing and have no idea whether it's right or not. but these are all in the right order because they're flashing and they're stuck together. So anyway, so that's Headventureland. That goes along with the Latin for Children series, and my kids have really enjoyed that. They do that every day without complaining yet, so we'll see. And it's got kind of funny, I've got the sound turned down on the computer, but it's got kind of funny like talking that goes on in the background. There's like robots kind of saying funny things while they're working. So, okay, so that's Headventureland. Goes along with Latin for Children. There's also one that goes along with Song School Latin. Let me flip the camera around real quick and do one more thing with you. Come on, camera. Flip over. I'm just going to be sideways. Flip. Nope, not flipping. Hold on. Let me see if I can. There we go. That's me. Okay, so the one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about was this. I am all for studying Latin, and I'm, happy to encourage, support, provide resources for students that want to study Latin. Okay, Jody, yes, in just a second. But I think that somehow studying Latin has become like this holy grail of excellence in homeschooling education, or any kind of education, really. And so there's a post up on my blog right now about why I teach Latin and why you don't necessarily have to. So if you're listening here and you're having this terrible guilt moment, like, I know I really should teach Latin. I know if I was a good mother, I would teach Latin, but it's just so overwhelming to me. And, that's just something that I don't see myself as being good at, or I don't have a strength in that area. Go check out that post. Again, my blog address is hswotrainingwheels.com. There are just some thoughts there about why it is that we all feel like we should teach Latin and what, maybe is behind some of that. Okay, Jody, so for older students, these materials, so for example, I don't know if you were on when I was talking about this, but the Latin Road could totally be used for high school. You could start this anywhere from, she says upper elementary, like 5th grade. I think that would be for an exceptionally studious and bright student. But I would say this would be definitely middle school, high school material. And Jody, I don't think you were on at the beginning, but I talked about kind of 2 different approaches to Latin. So this would be for the grammar approach to Latin. And then this would be if you wanted to take more of like a reading method approach to Latin, like a whole language approach to Latin, then something like Cambridge could be useful to you. And then, like I said, when we're done with the Latin for Children series, there is another series by the same publishers, Classical Academic Press, that is for, middle school, high school, and it's called Latin Alive. So you could move on from Latin for Children to Latin Alive, or you just, for your boys, you could just skip the Latin for Children and go right into Latin Alive. And I believe that the first unit of Latin Alive is like a review of everything they would have covered in Latin for Children. So, I don't know. I'm debating about whether we should, skip that and go into the second one. Maybe we should try another language after Latin. I'm not sure. But anyway, but the folks at Classical Academic Press are really good about answering questions about the material and how the different series coordinate with each other. So you can always get in touch with them about that. So, are there any questions? I know I just kind of plowed through a whole bunch of material. There's also all kinds of fun stuff out there. Not curriculum necessarily, but, there's the Latin version of the Grinch, if you want to check that out. There's also Mater and Serena, which is like Mother Goose poems in Latin, and it does come with a CD in the back, so you can listen to the Latin reading of the Mother Goose rhymes, and it's got, just cute little pictures. Hey, Melissa. So it's got the English on one side and the Latin on the other, and then it's got a whole bunch of vocabulary down at the bottom. So this would just be kind of like a fun supplementary thing. So, okay, well, I don't see any questions popping up, so I'm going to go. But if you're just hopping on, definitely catch the replay. I'm also going to post this on my blog's Facebook wall so that if you want to follow up with questions, you can do that there. And on Facebook, it's just facebook.com/HSWO Training Wheels. So that's where you can find me on Facebook. So, all right. Thanks, friends, for joining me. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.